Welcome to Crossfire Perspectives. Today we delve into a profoundly consequential question shaping our digital landscape. Should robust net neutrality regulations be mandated for internet service providers? At its core, net neutrality is the principle advocating that ISPs treat all internet communications equally, refraining from blocking, slowing down, or prioritizing specific content or services over others. Joining us to dissect this multifaceted issue are Dr. Evelyn Reed, a distinguished digital rights advocate and tech policy analyst who argues in favor of mandatory regulations, and Mr. Marcus Thorne, a seasoned telecom executive and free market economist who contends against such mandates. Our format entails opening statements, dedicated rebuttals, a moderated discussion to probe deeper, and concluding remarks. Dr. Reed, you have the floor for your opening statement.
Thank you, Alex. Net neutrality isn't merely a technical preference. It's the bedrock upon which an open, equitable, and innovative internet rests. It fundamentally entails prohibiting internet service providers from engaging in practices like blocking lawful content, throttling connection speeds for specific applications, or instituting paid prioritization schemes, creating internet fast lanes for those who can afford to pay. We must conceptualize the internet not as a luxury commodity, but as indispensable public infrastructure analogous to electricity or water grids. Consequently, it necessitates appropriate regulatory oversight to ensure fair access for all participants. Crucially, net neutrality fosters permissionless innovation. It guarantees a level playing field where startups and small enterprises can introduce novel services without seeking permission from ISPs or facing the daunting prospect of prohibitive access fees or deliberate performance degradation designed to favor incumbent players or the ISP's own offerings. Furthermore, it serves as a vital safeguard for freedom of expression. Without these protections, ISPs possess significant gatekeeper power, potentially enabling them to censor dissenting voices, disadvantage non-commercial content, or steer users towards affiliated services, thereby distorting the free flow of information. From a consumer standpoint, net neutrality ensures that users retain control over their internet experience, accessing the lawful content and applications they choose at the speeds they pay for, unhindered by artificial constraints imposed by providers. The inherent conflict of interest is palpable. ISPs have both the economic incentive and the technical capability to engage in anti-competitive behavior and discriminatory practices if not constrained by clear, enforceable common carrier principles. Ignoring this reality jeopardizes the very essence of the open internet and risks exacerbating the digital divide.
Thank you, Alex. While Dr. Reed paints a compelling picture, the reality of mandating stringent net neutrality regulations, particularly classifying broadband under Title II as a utility, is far more detrimental than beneficial. Such an approach represents heavy-handed, anachronistic regulation ill-suited to the incredibly dynamic and rapidly evolving internet ecosystem. My primary contention revolves around the significant chilling effect these mandates have on critical private investment in broadband infrastructure. Deploying next-generation networks like fiber optics and 5G demands enormous capital expenditure. Imposing utility-style regulations, with their associated price controls and bureaucratic hurdles, demonstrably depresses the potential return on investment, ROI, thereby disincentivizing companies from undertaking these costly but essential upgrades. Furthermore, the assertion that the broadband market lacks dynamism is increasingly inaccurate. We are witnessing growing competition, particularly with the advent of fixed wireless and satellite options, which naturally disciplines ISP behavior more effectively than rigid top-down rules. Light touch regulation, focused on transparency and prosecuting actual anti-competitive conduct, is far more appropriate. Moreover, the blanket prohibition favored by proponents ignores the potential for beneficial service differentiation. Tiered pricing and paid prioritization are not inherently nefarious. They can drive innovation by enabling quality of service. QoS guarantees essential for latency-sensitive applications like remote surgery, autonomous vehicles, or high-fidelity cloud gaming. These models can also help fund further network expansion. The alleged instances of net neutrality violations are often overstated or mischaracterized, frequently representing legitimate network management practices necessary for maintaining stability. We should avoid imposing a burdensome regulatory superstructure to address hypothetical or isolated problems, relying instead on existing consumer protection laws.
Mr. Thorne's assertion that net neutrality regulations invariably stifle investment is a recurring yet unsubstantiated claim. Numerous analyses, including data often presented by ISPs themselves to investors, indicate that investment cycles are primarily driven by factors such as market competition, technological advancements, and projected consumer demand, rather than the presence or absence of Title II classification during specific periods. The notion of burgeoning competition providing adequate consumer protection is, frankly, optimistic for vast swaths of the population. Many regions still suffer from effective monopolies or duopolies, leaving consumers with negligible choice and ISPs with significant market power. Relying solely on market forces in such contexts is insufficient. So-called light touch regulation often translates into frameworks riddled with loopholes, lacking the teeth for effective enforcement against sophisticated discriminatory practices. We need clear prohibitions, not vague guidelines susceptible to interpretation favoring incumbents. Regarding service differentiation, it's crucial to distinguish legitimate network management, ensuring overall network health, from anti-competitive paid prioritization. Allowing ISPs to charge edge providers for preferential treatment inevitably creates internet fast and slow lanes, disadvantaging startups, nonprofits, and diverse voices that cannot afford to pay tolls, ultimately harming consumers and innovation. Imagine a scenario where an ISP, also offering its own streaming service, deliberately throttles a competitor like Netflix or Hulu unless they pay a hefty fee. This isn't hypothetical. Such behaviors have been observed historically where regulations were lax or absent. That's the precise harm net neutrality prevents.
Dr. Reed selectively interprets the investment data. While multiple factors influence capital expenditure, the undeniable uncertainty introduced by the specter of utility-style regulation has a tangible chilling effect. Businesses hesitate to commit billions when the regulatory landscape can shift dramatically, potentially undermining their business models. Dismissing the need for sophisticated network management tools, which may include prioritization, is naive in the face of exponentially growing and diversifying internet traffic. Ensuring network stability and performance for all users sometimes requires differentiating between traffic types. Prohibiting this flexibility risks degrading the experience for everyone. Quality of service differentiation isn't about creating slow lanes. It's about enabling, quote, guaranteed performance lanes for applications that absolutely require them. This is fundamentally pro-consumer and pro-innovation, paving the way for next-generation services that Dr. Reed ostensibly supports, but whose technical prerequisites she seems willing to undermine through regulation. Furthermore, we are not operating in a lawless vacuum. Existing antitrust laws, enforced by bodies like the Federal Trade Commission, provide perfectly adequate mechanisms to address genuinely anti-competitive or deceptive practices by ISPs. Imposing Title II is regulatory overkill, a solution in search of a problem. The gatekeeper narrative is overblown. ISPs operate in a competitive environment, however imperfect Dr. Reed deems it, and face significant reputational risk if they engage in blatant censorship or anti-consumer practices. Market forces and existing legal frameworks offer sufficient constraints without resorting to utility classification.
Thank you both for those robust rebuttals. Let's delve deeper. Mr. Thorne, you specifically mentioned Title II classification as overly burdensome. Could you elaborate on the precise elements of Title II that you find most problematic for ISPs, beyond the general concern about investment?
Certainly, Alex. Title II brings with it a host of potential obligations derived from century-old telephone regulations. Things like tariffing requirements, complex approval processes for new service offerings, and the looming threat of rate regulation. Even if regulators forbear from applying all provisions immediately, the mere classification creates profound uncertainty and compliance costs, diverting resources from network building to legal and administrative functions. It treats a dynamic data network like a static voice network, which is fundamentally inappropriate.
Dr. Reed, how would you respond? Are these concerns about the specific baggage of Title II legitimate? And if so, how can they be mitigated while still achieving effective net neutrality?
The concerns are often exaggerated for effect. The FCC has historically used forbearance judiciously, tailoring the application of Title II to the specific context of broadband. The primary goal is establishing clear authority to enforce no blocking, no throttling, and no paid prioritization rules. Modernizing Title II or crafting sui generis legislation with similar authority are options, but the core principle, clear rules and enforcement power, derived from common carrier obligations, is essential. Without that legal foundation, rules lack durability.
A recurring point is reasonable network management. Dr. Reed, how do you draw the line between necessary traffic management for network stability and discriminatory throttling?
The line is drawn based on technical necessity versus commercial preference. Reasonable network management addresses congestion or security threats in a protocol-agnostic, application-agnostic way. Discriminatory practices involve targeting specific applications, services, or classes of service for degradation or preferential treatment based on commercial arrangements or competitive positioning, not genuine technical need. Transparency is key here. ISPs must be open about their management practices.
Mr. Thorne, your perspective on defining that line?
I largely agree on the principle of transparency, but the definition must allow for more nuance. As networks become more sophisticated, managing latency and jitter for specific applications, like telemedicine or industrial IoT, requires differentiation. Defining, quote, too narrowly could preclude beneficial network optimization and the development of specialized services that rely on guaranteed performance levels, hindering progress.
Let's touch upon zero rating, plans where using specific apps doesn't count against data caps. Dr. Reed, pro-consumer perk or anti-competitive tool?
While seemingly beneficial initially, zero rating can be profoundly anti-competitive. It allows ISPs to pick winners and losers, favoring their own services or those of partners who can afford to strike deals. This disadvantages smaller players and non-commercial content, subtly steering user behavior and distorting the market over time. It's a form of economic discrimination.
Mr. Thorne?
Zero rating plans are overwhelmingly popular with consumers precisely because they offer tangible value, more access to desired content without hitting data limits. Prohibiting them is anti-consumer. Provided these offers are transparent and non-exclusive, in principle, they represent market innovation, not a nefarious plot. We should allow consumers to choose.
How does this debate intersect with closing the digital divide?
Strong net neutrality ensures that once underserved communities gain access, they receive the full internet, not a curated or throttled version. It prevents ISPs from creating tiered access that could further marginalize low-income users. Ensuring equitable access is paramount.
The most effective way to close the digital divide is to encourage massive investment in deploying infrastructure to unserved and underserved areas. Heavy-handed regulation like Title II discourages precisely that investment, thereby perpetuating the divide. A focus on incentives for deployment is far more productive.
In conclusion, The arguments presented today underscore the fundamental necessity of mandating net neutrality. It is not an abstract ideal, but a concrete prerequisite for maintaining an open, equitable internet, an engine for innovation, a platform for free expression, and an essential tool for participation in modern society. Allowing internet service providers, often operating with limited competition, the unchecked power to control the flow of online information presents demonstrable risks. The potential for anti-competitive discrimination, the stifling of new voices and services, and the erosion of consumer choice are too significant to ignore. Net neutrality aligns with core societal values: equal opportunity for entrepreneurs, the protection of diverse viewpoints, and the fundamental right of consumers to access the lawful content of their choosing without interference. Therefore, we must insist on robust, clear, and legally enforceable net neutrality rules. These are not burdensome regulations, but essential safeguards for the future vitality and democratic nature of the Internet, ensuring it remains a level playing field for generations to come.
To summarize, while the goal of an open Internet is shared, the path of mandating utility-style net neutrality regulations, particularly under Title II, is profoundly counterproductive. It demonstrably threatens the private investment crucial for expanding and upgrading our broadband infrastructure, ultimately harming consumers and hindering technological progress. Market-based solutions, coupled with existing, less intrusive oversight mechanisms like antitrust and consumer protection laws enforced by the FTC, offer a more effective and less economically damaging approach. These tools are sufficient to address genuine instances of harm without imposing a rigid, one-size-fits-all regulatory regime. We must resist the urge to apply antiquated regulations to one of the most dynamic sectors of our economy. The Internet thrives on flexibility and innovation. Imposing burdensome rules designed for monopolies of the past will inevitably stifle the very qualities that have made it so successful. Therefore, I advocate for a regulatory environment that prioritizes infrastructure investment, fosters competition, and allows for the technological flexibility needed to develop the next generation of Internet services, rather than imposing mandates that risk achieving the opposite.
Dr. Evelyn Reed, Mr. Marcus Thorne, thank you both for an exceptionally insightful and vigorously argued discussion on this critical topic. We've heard compelling arguments centering on the tension between fostering permissionless innovation and safeguarding free expression versus prioritizing infrastructure investment and enabling service differentiation through market mechanisms. The debate over how best to regulate Internet providers to achieve these potentially conflicting goals remains complex and profoundly important for our digital future. Thank you to our viewers for joining Cross